Today I'm going to explain the 3 post-process effects that I used in my film Prazinburk Ridge that combined to result in this quite unique look of the film. Welcome back to Real Time Workflows.
Hey, welcome to Real Time Workflows. I'm MX Bell. I worked on Deadpool and Wolverine, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, 1917, Hobbs and Shaw, Wheel of Time, Little Mermaid, No Time to Die, tons more. What you're going to get in the channel are my pro tips and how I use Unreal Engine to make films. So let's get started. Let's make some stuff. See you down the road.
I got asked this, thank you for the questions and everything. I'm really glad of the interest in the film and how I made it. I've got the 3 techniques to show you, and if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to show you a thing on the marketplace that you can buy for very little money that will do these effects together and more, and it saves you kind of making them from scratch. But if you want to make it from scratch, I'm going to show you links to the places that I found out how to do this. Because I made Prazinburk Ridge in Unreal Engine 4.27, or at least I finished it in 4.27, I actually started it in 4.25. Because of that, I thought, rather than going back to Unreal Engine 4, I'll bring the things through to Unreal Engine 5 and show you in here. And I've got the military outpost thing that came out, just to keep it thematically correct, that came out the other week from Quixel. So the first thing I'm going to do is, we've got some post-process effects, which means they're going to go into a post-process volume. Now these came in the environment. And I put all my stuff into this, into just a folder called Cel Shader. I really did not know what I was doing at the time, so I was very much playing around. There's lots of different versions. Some of them I made for specific shots, like this one was for shot 1645, whatever shot 1645 was. So what we're going to do is we're going to add these to the post-process volume. So under our post-process materials, we're going to add an array element. Now, and then we're going to choose an asset reference. Let's just start with taking a look at the Kuwahara. So Kuwahara adds this effect to the world. And we can see this is where we get our painterly effect from. I wish I had this asset when I made this film. I really do. The result was better than I expected, because when I was making it, I thought it was going to do it like per frame, which it is doing, but like you can kind of, as you move over things, they feel like it's actually texture that's stuck to the ground. There's actually, you can actually move over it, which is nice. Okay, so to do this, I went and I found this video. So I'll link it there. You can follow the process. I believe you can also just buy it off him on Gumroad or something, the actual effect, and that'll get you this shader. So that is our Kuwahara filter to make a painterly look. Now, a couple of things to notice about Kuwahara. If we open it up, we will see here that it has a radius setting. Now I've got 2. Now if I double that, it increases the amount of the effect. Okay, and the other thing to bear in mind about the amount of the effect is that if you go to full screen mode, you'll see that actually the effect is related to the screen size. So the bigger the screen, the more of a radius you're going to need to get the same effect. All right, so in your viewport, when you're working like this, the viewport should always look too much. The effect should be too much. Don't configure it in your viewport. You want to configure it for a full screen render. When you go full screen, you need to remember that if you are rendering at 4K, you need to be four times higher, because the radius, you need to be 4 times the work. The Kuwahara needs to do 4 times the work to fill what is effectively 4 times the screen size. So that is a Kuwahara filter, and that is the kind of core effect of what went on in Prazinburk Ridge. Now let's look at cel shading. Cel shading, you probably know from video games, things like that, Zelda. And it basically makes things look like a cartoon. I'm not a big fan of it, I'll be honest. And it's kind of under duress that I did it. I explained in the other video, which you can see kind of up here, why I did it this way. But if you want to do it, it added a nice effect when combined with Kuwahara, I felt. So we can go back to our post-process volume. We're going to add another array element, and I'm going to go asset reference, and I'm going to drop in my cel shader, probably this one. So the way that my cel shader worked, I copied it off this video. So this guy explains how to make a cel shader that is selective. So we use it via the render custom depth pass, and when we check that on an object, it will cel shade that specific object. During that video, he'll also point you to this video, which is the Epic Games one on how to make a cel shader, and you can follow through with that. But you can see how it's flattening out the shading on it. So that's actually now cel shaded. The final thing that I would do, and I would do this entirely separately, is I would render a outlines pass. Now you can't render the outlines pass with Kuwahara on, because it will come out looking like, so it would kind of look like this, right? Now what it's doing, because of the Kuwahara, is the Kuwahara is having an effect on it. So if I set that to 0 now, we see that we actually get a much brighter line. I believe I also added a post process for the lines to take down this bloom effect. But nonetheless, that's kind of how I did the outlines. I would render this, and then I would take that into After Effects, where I would invert it, and then I created a new post process. So this is a post process, but then I would render everything without the toon shader. So I would, without the lines. So I would set that to 0, set this to 1. So those two would be set on, and it would render like that. And then I would come in and I would set this to 1 and set these to 0, and then render one of these. And then I would take that into After Effects. And after inverting the lines, we would get them looking like this. All right. So this is the render of the lines pass for this shot, and it's not bad, but I wanted to have a bit more life, and so I added this black solid with a grain effect. So if I set this is currently set to blend mode overlay, but if I set it to normal, we can see all this is doing is adding a black and white sort of random noise. And by setting it to overlay, you can see that it actually eats into the lines. Okay, so that's what they were when they came out, and then it eats into them like this. And so that every frame, because the noise is different on every frame, it's eating into it like it's almost like it's a different pencil line each time, which is what I was going for. But I felt like it was a bit too heavy, a bit too heavy-handed, and so I saved this as a template basically, and I would add this layer back in, and this is the lines again just as they came out, but I would be able to fade back on the ones that came out of Unreal. So it was usually around 50%. I would add 50% of the original back in, so you just got a little bit of the dancing lines, but not too much. And then when we bring this back into here and turn on the lines, we get the lines kind of overlaid. And that is how I made Prazinburk Ridge, and why it looks like it does. Now, if you want to use this combination of effects, but you can't be asked, and I don't blame you, for making your own cel shader, your own lines shader, your own Kuwahara shader, you can go to the marketplace and you can get something called Chameleon. Let me show you what Chameleon does. So we can add Chameleon to our level, and it has got in its list of effects, one of them is Kuwahara. So you can browse a list of effects if you want. You can find this thing on the marketplace. But we add Kuwahara to this. The Kuwahara effect in here, you can see it's basically the same, and you get basically the same options. So you've got the radius, the Kuwahara amount. Okay, you see how it's doing it, and it effectively becomes unreadable. That kind of looks how it was how it looked in my viewport when I was making Prazinburk Ridge, but really you just want a little bit of it. So we can do that. We can also add some toon shading. So if we hit toon shading, it's going to draw a line over everything. Now you may or may not want that. If you want to go with the kind of thing that I had before, and if you want to do that, we can go down here to custom depth, right? So now we would add exactly the same way I did. We would add custom depth pass, and then we get the same thing. This is now toon shaded. A couple of other things to note that I did that affected this. So because I wanted it to look like a 2D animated cartoon, my settings were 12 frames a second, which is what we call on twos, which means every other drawing. And what happens is if you render it you render it at 12 frames a second out of Unreal anyway, and then it comes in at 12 frames a second in here, and I would export each shot then from After Effects. But then when I bring them into Premiere, I interpret them at 24, which adds a frame. So the actual project is at 24 frames a second, as it should be, but each video is interpreted at 24, so that it adds every other frame perfectly. And as a result, you can see here I've got, as we do this, there is motion blur on here. And if you add a 2D animation, you would not have motion blur. So if you go watch Prazinburk Ridge, which of course you can watch up here anytime you want, also link in the description, you'll see that there is no motion blur. And in order to do that, we go into the post process and turn off motion blur. So you just turn motion blur down to 0, and that will do that. All these things added up to the effect, that the combined effect in Prazinburk Ridge. So it's the 3 post processes, or 2 Unreal post processes, and then a post process in After Effects. But also taking off motion blur and doing it on 2s, 12 frames a second, adds to the feel of a more traditional cartoon, a more traditional animated film. Now, I think I can kind of tell, if I was watching it, I could kind of tell roughly how it was made. I wouldn't really know that it was made in Unreal Engine, I suppose, but I did have, when it went around festival circuits, I had people kind of guessing like how I'd made it. They didn't know, they couldn't tell whether it was rotoscoped or 3D or drawn. Some people didn't even know if I'd drawn it. So I add that effect of just kind of confusing people and not letting people get hung up on the medium, how it was made, whether it was 3D, whether it was motion capture or traditional animation or anything else. It's just kind of, and it's not, because it's kind of hodgepodge of all kinds of things. I used a lot of motion capture. I did a lot of animation on it. The eyes on the shots tend to be performance capture. It's me sat here, performance capture. But the mouth, I couldn't do that. So I animated all the lip sync myself. So there's not one specific thing that I did. It was all these little tiny things that kind of added up, kind of accidentally, to be this kind of whole that were kind of greater than the sum of its parts, really. So that's how I made Prazinburk Ridge, and how I used post processes to create a unique style and look of the film. But all that is not worth anything if the story's not good, and because it was built on a good story. That's what carried it through. It could have looked like dog shit. It would still have been a good story, So that's it for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. We're going to do a little bit more talking about Prazinburk Ridge as well. So stay tuned, and I'll catch you down the road.